I'm going to jump to Ruth and I.
Yeah.
Um, the two of us have been participating in a morning prayer group since the beginning of the
The
pandemic,
beginning of the pandemic, like maybe a few weeks in.
in,
Tuesday
yeah,
Roop, yeah, Tuesday Roop, sort of started it, and we sort of got.
who is at St. Paul's Woodbury in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And a number of us, through various ways, ended up in this group. And there are about 11 of us now, I think.
At the height, yes, right. We're
Yeah,
not
if
always there
everybody shows
anymore.
up.
We're not, yeah, we don't always come anymore because things have gotten busy again. But boy, it was, I tell you, it was a lifeline during the pandemic to have that every morning. We did every morning. We did Christmas. We did, we did all the holidays, but we sort of got the best of us. At times there were four priests in the group and Lene, who's like a priest. Um, and so it was just such an interesting mix of people, and we got to have kind of both Bible study and prayers, because in the middle we just sort of would start talking about whatever the reading was of that day, and it was it was sort of
We'd
unusual
go
that way.
through the gospel and then we kind of say, what did you hear?
Yeah.
And give everybody a chance to respond to what stuck with them. And that's still our format. We are blessed with two amazing musicians, Ruth and Deanna, and they both
We'll do the psalms,
they will
the
bless
canticles. We do
us
the canticles,
with the canticles.
and
Yeah.
I improvise always the first canticle. I've just gotten in that habit, and but it's just nice to have both worlds, sort of a mini Bible study in a way. And we get into some stuff too about, well, what's that about? Why did that happen? And then we'd also and then we have the prayers. So the prayer after we do the sort of mini Bible study, then we go follow morning prayer and we get to the prayers. And so we know about everybody's lives and everyone, the ins and outs of everyone. And also another thing that happened was that if something's up, if something is tough, you have this group that will be praying for you, and there's and you can send out that email and say, whoa, this happened, help. And you have this wall of 5, 6, 7 people sending out prayers for you, which is,
Yeah.
oh,
We had it happen this last week. One of the
yes, we did.
couples who participated, their daughter ended up in the ER and they were taking care of the grandkids. So they sent out a quick email to us and they knew that we were all then praying for them and would do. The group has, let's see, people in Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and New York at this point.
Yeah.
And it's open. If you know anybody who wants to get up and join us at 7:30 in the morning, you're welcome to.
It's been really a very, and as I say, a lifeline. And I've been in also other groups. I was in a couple Bible study groups that were also ended up forming communities. And one of them, we had a Wednesday morning group, and the guy said, oh, we'll have to stop Bible study. I said, Zoom. And he said, oh, really? And so we started on Zoom, and then he left. And what happened was, because we'd gotten used to each other, this particular group, we just decided, okay, we're meeting for coffee. So it continued on, just four friends meeting for coffee, what originally started as a Bible. So it formed a community.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Comments, observations?
I would just say that my idea for the Bible study came from the church I last served, which was Trinity Episcopal Church in Meredith, New Hampshire, where they did a lectionary Bible study on Zoom, just the people in the congregation. But I'm mentioning that because we also had morning prayer on Zoom, and it was wonderful. It was live, and it was a wonderful way of maintaining and actually building community.
Megan was asking about why don't you say what you wanted to? It's hard for me to read, and then you just tell us what you want.
Oh, that's okay. In this, I know that our let me start over. My first job is a church musician, and I'm always amazed at how the Holy Spirit works through me and with me as I plan music. Our choir sings 2 anthems every Sunday, and I select all the hymns, and I do that months in advance. And so when things in the world happen and I haven't given any thought to which hymns I selected 3 months ago, and they're all like so applicable to what's happening in the world, it's always amazing to me. I also find that amazement and wonderment in the lectionary. And we have in our congregation families that are, the wife is Christian, the husband is Jewish. We have a couple families that way. We also have a group of families who are from Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. And their conflict between the Israeli and Palestine crap that's going on. And how do we, as leaders in our congregations and as leaders for study and to bring the word to people that may need comfort, how do we do this with all of this conflicting stuff? I guess is what my question is.
I'm going to throw that one to Jason because he's dealt with some of this stuff.
Thank you, Lene. Oh, yeah. One of the things that comes to mind for me is this something that we've seen a lot of in Goffstown and here in our own parish has been around having healthy and difficult conversations that emphasize understanding, lots of norm and boundary setting and listening. I wonder if that might be sort of a place to begin. I know in the Episcopal Church, our parish is using an Episcopal resource, Sacred Ground, that is on a faith-based approach on racial reconciliation. So it's not directly applicable, but some of the ways in which we do norming for conversations there, because those are conversations that can get intensely emotional very quickly, which is sort of the connection I'm making here. I would wonder if there's something there, or in our town of Goffstown, we've had a lot of sort of red-blue political division that has had our public library, some of our parishioners through the public library have been offering techniques for having difficult conversations. And I just wonder if that might be a place to begin that is rooted in an ethic of mutual respect and dignity. I don't know if that's helpful. We have elected for ourselves to do this Sacred Ground program. This is one that we chose not to do on Zoom. We chose to do this one in person, and it's one of the only in-person formation programs we've done in the past 2 years. And part of that commitment for the being grounded in norms and principles on that.
Sure, I totally agree with that. So our church has, we have helped fund, it's called the Justice League of Greater Lansing, and our congregation members have pledged $100,000 toward reparations. And we have been building that in the city of Lansing and in our state. We've done many all-church book reads, conversations. We've partnered with many of the Black churches in our community to do these things. So I don't think that it's not that this work or these conversations are challenging. I think they are challenging. It's just so different. We can see in our city how systemic racism and keeping poor people poor, and how the government works towards that, and how we as a people buy into that system. Our current church read is Poverty by America. So we're kind of into that right now. But this whole, for me, the Jewish and Palestinian conflict is so not part of our norm as Presbyterians, white Presbyterians in the middle of white Michigan. To be honest, I grew up in Detroit. Lansing's totally white. It's so challenging for us to try to put ourselves or try to understand the depth and history and the emotional connection, the familiar family connection that people have with this.
I think it's a particularly difficult situation.
Yeah, I'm just we're finding hard. I'm finding it hard to find space. We want to find space for people to feel safe to say that they're grieving, that they're sad, that they're wishing this would stop. But at the same time, I have congregation members or members of those congregants' families that are very either extremely pro-Palestinian or extremely pro-Israeli. Like, how do we work with that?
And this is just off the top of my head, knowing the history of that conflict, if you got somebody who could kind of walk you through the history of Palestine from about 1870 to 1965. I was a political science major. This was my senior thesis. So, but understanding some of what has happened to bring us to this point. And it starts for the modern issues in about 1870. So if you could have a professor or two, maybe one from each side, to sit down and walk people through it, just say, we're just going to talk about how did we get here? How did we end up here? And the good and bad on both sides. And try to be as even as you can, as a place to start and a place to say, this is a difficult, situation that's been going on for a long time. I don't know.
I wanted to say that there are a number of covenants for what are called covenants for respectful communications that are available online from various denominations and perhaps other types of groups, and they're very helpful. It gives you some ground rules for establishing a safe place, and you can have the group read the covenant at the beginning of the meetings. So I just wanted to make sure you knew about that.
Yeah. And maybe
yes, thank you. I mean, we're doing a gun violence thing with the city and our local PD and other community organizations, and we're all agreed that we're going to read a covenant so it doesn't become a let's pile onto the mayor. That it's like, how can we actually do something, not just put crap on somebody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm a history nerd, so that's always where I start. But again, that's something that could be done online. And in some ways, a situation like that, doing it on Zoom might give everybody a little space. We talk about how when you're online, there's a little bit of space. It's not quite as in your face as it is in person. In this case, it might be helpful to have that space. I don't know, just a thought. Other questions, situations, things that you're thinking about? Things that are brought up? Kathleen, you're dealing with a whole different situation. Tell me what you're thinking as you're listening.
If I was going to ask a question, I would wonder, like in my tradition, we made big switches to Zoom in our meetings. One of the functions of the Quaker meetings in New England is that we all have the ability to speak. So our amplification, it's not like a one-way broadcast sometimes, which was a little tricky to figure out. And we are in the process of trying to figure out, as a people in New England, there's reluctance. I would love to ask what, is there reluctance from people either coming back, insisting that only in person is the way to go, that we have to do Zoom? Like, what's the feeling about this returning, and how does that work? It's in some places it's polarizing a little bit, and in some places it's fine. Kind of depends on the function and how it's working, I think, for a lot of people. But I'm just curious how congregations are dealing with that, if anybody's had any specific concerns about that either way.
There hasn't been any discussion in my community, church community. We're kind of tiptoeing along. There are 2 Bible studies every week, and they went completely Zoom during the pandemic. One of them has remained completely Zoom, and the other one has become a hybrid. But stable at that. Only 2 or 3 people come in person and everybody else is on Zoom. Our worship is, we still have Zoom on the 10:15 worship. Our vicar also does Sunday morning prayer on streams on Facebook. But we have in-person 8 o'clock and 10:15 services that they're almost as well attended as they were before the pandemic. But having Zoom and the Facebook streaming means that there are people who can check in and try us out without actually being there in person. So maybe, it could be doing something good around the edges that we don't know about. We've not tried to sit down and have a discussion about, should we do this in person? Should we do that on Zoom or at a distance yet? Hopefully we will, but we haven't yet.
I know St. Matthew's, we have Zoom for our Sunday morning worship as well as on Facebook. And I know we have some people who are unable because of health or whatever reasons to be present on Sunday morning physically, and they will be on Zoom, including a woman in her 90s who is frequently on Zoom.
Actually, I'll add to that, Lene. That
Yeah.
90-year-old woman actually prefers Zoom now because she is so hard of hearing that the Zoom auto captions allow her to participate in a way that she could not do if she was physically present in the building. So she actually gets a better experience of worship on Zoom at home, which I enjoy seeing.
Yeah. And then I know that we've had some people who have peeked at our service on Facebook several times and then showed up. So it's kind of, they've tried us out on Facebook and then they've showed up. We also have some people who were members of St. Matthew's, have moved away or work on Sundays, and they will participate on Facebook and then come when they can. So
same with
that's-
the 2 churches that I've been involved with most. St. James is still streaming 9:30, 11:15, and their evening service. They're still streaming that. And Heavenly Rest, I think, only does the morning service, but they have they have a online community that watches, and so when they do the prayers, they'll do the prayers that the clergy have listed, and then they'll have the iPhone with the prayers from the people online, which is
that's
kind
nice.
of cool. Yeah, so
Yeah.
they still, I mean, they're still streaming, but they also will say the prayers for the people online. And there was one service that had the necrology in it that they weren't going to put online, and then they realized that there was a bunch of people that really wanted to hear the names that couldn't come, so they put that one online so that people could hear,
Yeah.
those that couldn't come could hear the names read. So
It's hard to create community with
yeah,
worship because it's a one way,
yep,
it's a one way kind of thing. But that's true in person as well,
oh yeah,
because unless you're staying for coffee or talking before or after, you know, if you just walk in, sit down, and leave, you're not engaging with anybody else. So I think the trick to community is you have to engage with other people, and how you do that is a question. Somebody asked me a question, which I'm going to throw out to all of you. One of the places I post this is a group in England, and one of them there, when I posted it, said, "What about children and youth?" And I couldn't answer that one. My gut feeling is that youth might work if you did it the right way, and that children don't have it doesn't work for them.
Yeah,
But
I've been
what
thinking
do
about
you
this a
all think?
lot. Uh, and I feel that at least the place where I'm at in my thinking is I'm very hard pressed to want to try to do youth group or something on Zoom. Uh, I but the thing that I'm finding exciting or intriguing would be the idea of, instead of using technology to do Zoom, to use to rely more on social media. That it's going to be less about all of us sort of being on Zoom at the same time, and rather, I'm wondering about practices like the Advent Word from, what is that, SSJE does Advent Word, where they give a word a day for the season of Advent and ask you to post something on social media that responds to that word with the hashtag Advent Word, hashtag peace. You know, to do social media engagement that is able to be done in community, but I feel might work better. Thinking ahead to some of the work I'll be doing at Camp Winnie next August, and they had a bunch of youth who were barely engaged in camp because a bunch of them had their phones. And I'm trying to come up with social media activities for them to do, scavenger hunts and like Advent Word type activities that would have them using their phones to do something about faith in that setting. So
That's
that's
a
sort of where I'm
challenge and
going
a
in my
half.
thinking now.
Yeah. I was kicking around after this question the idea of, is there like a Dungeons and Dragons format that would work? I know Roger Spear has done some work with that, and some others have. You know, to come up with something where you're playing together online and it has a faith component. I don't know. I'm just kicking around ideas at this point.
Yeah.
The cat came and the cat went.
Yeah.
whose kitty is
And the
that?
cat came back. The very next day.
Like the Holy Spirit, we don't know where they come from or where they're going.
Very much so.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad that we have interspecies participation in this.
Our,
Yes.
I had an ancient black cat that participated in morning prayer. She was always right next to me on the red pillow, and I just turned the phone, and there she'd be. She did not last too far into the, but she loved it, and she would just really participate every morning, and she was always there.
Always
Very
there.
To
sweet.
say who the Holy Spirit is calling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brad, do you have any thoughts about all this?
Thousands and none. Yeah, I'm just taking it all in and actually taking notes. We had a hard choice when COVID started, and we argued back and forth, and we didn't have the facility or the talent to do both Zoom at the services and Facebook. So we went with Facebook. And I'm more of a Zoom person. I managed to help a couple of our groups when they have Zoom needs for their face sharing and so forth. So my natural inclination, because I cannot stand Facebook, and I'll say it outright, is to go towards Zoom, because I think people feel safer interacting on Zoom by far. And I've picked up an awful lot here in terms of ideas to go with, and I think that's very helpful. I find that we see, at least at St. Anne's, in leadership, we seem to have folks who really see a lot of merit to Zoom, and other folks who are just flat out, you're zoomed out, you accomplish nothing on Zoom because everyone's Zoom exhausted, we're meeting in person. And then of course, half the people show up that are supposed to be there because they'd rather be doing it on Zoom. So that's kind of where I'm trying to help steer things here. And I guess I'm hearing a lot of the same things, that there are real benefits to working with Zoom as a platform.
Once you get used to it. My husband and I belong to a monastic community, a dispersed Benedictine community. We essentially live as solitaries and get together as a group a couple of times a year. As part of increasing cohesiveness in that group, where we don't sit down together on any kind of a regular basis, my husband had the idea of having evening prayer offered at a particular time. And it's actually 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. And people in the community from all across the country, literally from the East Coast to Seattle, Washington, and down to Los Angeles and Texas, dial in. And we've worked out a way to do evening prayer, even though everybody can't talk at once. You have one leader and one person reads the psalm, one person says the prayer, and everybody else speaks along with it. But there's a half an hour before the service starts. And the first 15 minutes of that half hour is chit chat and catch up and talk. And the second 15 minutes of that half hour is silence and preparation before the service begins. And our members they just love it. They love it because it's a chance to see each other more than every 6 months and talk. And we've had it, the fact that these services are happening is on our website, and inquirers will come and check out the evening prayer service and think about it, and then maybe call back and explore whether they want to become members, whether they want to become newcomers. So it's having something on a regular basis so that you get used to being in it, to the little bits and pieces that can get in your way, and you have to work your way through them. And eventually you get a little better and a little better, and then you're comfortable with it. But I think it's a very valuable tool. And I think an awful lot of good has come from it. I mean, this is a golden diamond out of a dread disease. You know, none of us would ever have done this if it wasn't for the COVID at all. So
I tried to do a book group, a diocesan book group before COVID. I couldn't get anybody to come on. Yeah. Nancy, what's your reaction?
I have two. One is that I took a 2-year course from Oblate School of Theology in Texas, and it happened to occur during COVID, and therefore everything was done over Zoom. We've never met each other in person. And part of that was what we call an elder circle, which was a smaller group of people that met on a regular basis for group spiritual direction. We finished that course 2 years ago. My elder groups, we still meet. We still meet every month and have tremendously deep discussions on theological issues. We had no trouble developing relationship with one another. And I mean, you know, we have never met each other in person, and yet we care so deeply about each of the other people in that group that you'd think that we were long lost brothers and sisters. So I have not found, I mean, that's one example, but others from church, I have not found that it's difficult to establish relationships through Zoom.
That's the same experience we've had with our morning group.
Yeah, I mean, I think Zoom
We become
was,
family. We become family.
Yes. I mean,
And
in close family.
I've never met Lene in person.
Yeah. I'm currently
In person.
In person, we've met, but yeah, it's like what you're saying.
We just finished doing a second group taking the 8-week spirituality, aging and spirituality course that I developed. And we want to take it online, but we aren't quite sure how to go about doing that. Luckily, the people down at Oblate that ran the course have said they'd work with us in terms of how to prepare to do it online. And we're going to take them up on it because we aren't sure how to go about doing it. They know, they did a 2-year course online, so 8 weeks shouldn't be a big problem. So, you know, I mean, I think there's pros and cons when you're going to do something formal like a course. I think you've got to know what you're doing.
Yeah. I think there's pros and cons with any format, whether you're in person or online or whatever. And you need to work through it.
Mhm.
Paul, you're the least technological person I know. What do you think?
A lot of competition for that. Yeah, actually, I was just sitting here thinking I would like to throw in an observation about what makes the formation of community and good communication come about in these kinds of meetings. And I don't think it's not limited to Zoom meetings, but any kind of a gathering or interaction or discussion. But looking at the Bible studies that we do Wednesday mornings with Celeste, a lot of it comes down to being honest. I mean, looking at, well, we're starting with the text, the biblical text, looking at a passage and sharing not just a technical analysis of it, but what we're actually thinking about that, what we're feeling, how we're responding to that. This is a lectionary based study, and the lectionary is pretty selective, but even so, you get plenty of passages in there where from time to time you read one and go, what is going on here? What does this have anything to do with the God that I believe in? And to be able to bring those kinds of, I guess, gut reactions to the group really fosters discussion, and as you discuss, it fosters community. And hand in hand with that is the more that this takes place, the more it becomes apparent that this is a safe environment for doing that. It's a respectful place where if you say, I don't see God in this at all, no one's going to jump down your throat. They're going to think seriously about the issues that you see with that particular passage or with that topic. And we really do spin off times into more real world contemporary problem discussions on the basis of the things that come up in these ancient texts. That's what was going through my mind as we were talking about this.
One really practical thing, I think some people are a little intimidated by using Zoom. And I think if I were starting something on Zoom, or it might not be a bad idea occasionally, to ask everybody to bring their laptops to church and sit down with some people and show them how to get on Zoom.
A great thought.
What the little icons are on the bottom, how to use the chat, all those little technical things. Maybe grab a couple of teenagers and have them there to help, or young adults. Have people take notes or write up some notes so that maybe some people who are a little unsure have a chance to get on a little more solid footing. I think that wouldn't be a bad idea from time to time to just say we're going to have a technology day, and here's how you use some of this stuff so you can
That's a great thought.
We needed that at the beginning of the pandemic.
Never
I
entered
mean,
my
Yeah,
head,
we
but of
did.
course.
We couldn't
I
do
I
it.
mean, how many
But I think
times
even
at the
now-
beginning of the pandemic did we all say, "Wait, no, I can't."
Yeah, and somebody would have to walk us through it.
And then there'd be a horrible echo because everyone had on. Oh, it was really intense there in the
Yeah,
beginning.
but
We had
all
to
got
do
through
that.
it. We all learned it. But
Yeah,
there are some people who are still
yeah.
uncertain about it and maybe hesitant to try it because of
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So it couldn't hurt, maybe once a year or something to do it. And maybe
How
every
about
time you
Lent?
do it, I know every time I do it, I learn something new. Somebody will say, "Did you know you could?" Oh, really? I didn't know that. Plus, it's always upgrading and changing. So, you get you get there. So, but that might not be a bad idea. Yeah, just on a very practical kind of thing. But I do think it has more to do with building trust, with conversation, being willing to put yourself out there. And bye, Ruth. I'll see you later. So I think those are things to keep in mind if you're starting something or if you're trying something out. Facebook's harder because it's not two-way, it's time lagged, but it can have its advantages like Advent Word or something like that. And you can use those. There are 3 settings on Facebook. There's a public setting. There is I always forget the second one's called, a private setting, which means you have to invite somebody in, but they can look up your group. And then there's a secret setting, they call it, which means nobody can find your group unless you tell them about it and you invite them in. So you can have a very small circle of people if you choose to.
Yeah.
So that's just, something to put in your back pocket. I know some churches have used that for families as an adjunct to Sunday school. They will make them part of that secret group and put out questions or ideas and invite them to respond. But by making it a secret group, you don't have to worry about anybody seeing it or anybody seeing the responses other than the people you've allowed in the group. So, if you choose to use Facebook for some things, that is an option. And Facebook has the advantage of not being time sensitive the way Zoom is. Zoom, we all have to show up at the same time. Facebook, we don't. So, other questions, thoughts, comments? Want to tell me I'm completely out of my mind?
It's actually part of the reason I'm wondering about Facebook. I mean, not many youth are on Facebook. They're on other social media platforms, but using social media platforms as opposed to Zoom for youth, in part because we were just meeting with some parents of youth and trying to find scheduled time to get youth together is a insane hurdle these days, with their overbooked schedules. But that sort of, if it's freed from, you said that time lapse and that time lag, to put a question out or ask for a photo that corresponds to a hashtag or something, those things can be done at 1 a.m. when I'm fast asleep. But a teenager with a phone might actually be able to interact with something at a time that doesn't actually work for me, and the times that work for me don't work for them. But that format of social media might actually be an advantage for online youth work. I'm just kind of wondering.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to know your audience. I mean, that's part of it. If you schedule a Bible study at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, you're not going to get people who are working. That's just the truth of it. But that's okay, because that's the group you've got. And, if you schedule it for 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night, you're going to get a different group. We have 8 o'clock people and we have 10 o'clock people. We have 2 congregations. And to some degree, we now have a 3rd congregation because we've got a Facebook congregation. And we don't need to box them into being what those other congregations are. They are their own thing. And I think it's important to remember that. I will throw out a really interesting thing that I stumbled across. Central Synagogue in New York, which is huge, has a very large online congregation. And they have a running chat with that congregation during worship. And they actually have a person on staff who's in charge of creating community with the online worshipers. And so they set up all kinds of different things with those worshipers, some Zoom things, some other things, but they have somebody who's dedicated to that. So if you ever get a chance to go on their website and just kind of peruse it, and or even look at part of their worship service in the chat that goes on online, it's absolutely fascinating to see how they set that up. And it certainly gives you a really interesting thought. So, well, we have reached the end here. And thank you all for coming and participating. Any last minute thoughts? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yep. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good to see you, Kathleen. Oh, there she goes.
I
Night.
I knew